A very good afternoon and thank you for joining us on BTV Global News at 12. I am Ruth Obodo and now the news in detail. Freed Venezuela president leader and engineer Carlos Alberto Azuaye is alleged that detainees in Venezuela's prisons are subjected to systematic torture, including beatings with baseball bats during his more than 1 year in detention. The report.
Azuaye, a prominent ruler, organizer and social activist, was released in January after being held for over 12 months by Venezuelan authorities. Speaking publicly after his release, he described a pattern of abuse inside detention facilities that he said was used to punish and intimidate prisoners, particularly those considered political and social opponents of the government. According to Azuaye, detainees were routinely beaten by prison guards and security personnel during interrogations and at other times while in custody. He alleged that the abuse was not isolated but part of an organized practice within the prison system. He said prisoners were often denied basic rights, including access to proper medical care, legal counsel, and contact with family members. Azuaye was detained amid a broader crackdown on activists, union leaders, and peasant organizers in Venezuela. Human rights groups have repeatedly accused Venezuelan security forces of arbitrary arrest, ill treatment of detainees, and the use of torture to extract confessions or silence critics. The Venezuelan government has consistently denied allegations of torture and systematic abuse in detention centers, maintaining that prisoners are treated in accordance with national law and international standards. However, international organizations, including rights monitors and advocacy groups, have documented similar accounts from former detainees from over recent years. Since his release, Azuaye has called for an independent investigation into conditions inside Venezuelan prisons and accountability for officials allegedly responsible for abuse. He said he plans to continue advocating for the rights of detainees and rural communities. Despite what he described as ongoing risks to his personal safety, his testimony adds to growing international concern over human rights conditions in Venezuela as pressure mounts on authorities to allow independent monitoring of detention facilities and ensuring protection for activists and political prisoners. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, has made multiple emotional public appeals for help as the search continues for her 84-year-old mother, Nancy Guthrie, who has been missing for more than a week with no suspects yet identified and no confirmed proof of her whereabouts. The report.
Nancy Guthrie was last seen at her home in the Catalina Foothill area near Tucson, Arizona, late on January 31st after being dropped off by a family member. When she did not show up for a scheduled church service the next day, family members became concerned and reported her missing on February 1st. Investigators led by the Pina Country Sheriff's Department, with assistance from the FBI, believe Nancy was adopted from her residence against her will. Law enforcement has treated her home as a crime scene, noting evidence that includes blood matching Nancy's DNA on the porch and the doorbell camera that was found disconnected. Despite this indication of foul play, no suspects or persons of interest have been publicly identified, and authorities say they are still gathering evidence and reviewing leads. FBI officials have also said there is currently no confirmed communication between the family and any suspected kidnappers. Over the past days, two purported ransom notes have surfaced that were sent to news outlets. One of these notes reportedly demanded a ransom including a figure of up to $6 million to be paid to Bitcoin and set deadline for payment, though law enforcement has not verified authenticity of these communications or received any credible proof that Nancy is alive. As one reported ransom deadline passed on Monday without resolution, Savannah and her sibling have continued to plead for information and cooperation. In videos shared on social media, Savannah has described the situation as a nightmare and said the family is at an hour of desperation, imploring anyone with information, no matter how small, to contact law enforcement. She and her siblings have also expressed willingness to pay for Nancy's safe return. The FBI has offered a reward of up to $50,000 for information leading to Nancy's recovery or the arrest and conviction of those responsible. The digital billboards have been deployed across parts of the southwestern United States to raise awareness. Nancy Godfrey is believed to have limited mobility and significant medical needs, including daily medication, increasing concern for her health as the search continues. Federal and local investigators are continuing their work, including forensic analysis, neighborhood canvassing, and review of potential surveillance footage, and law enforcement officials have repeatedly encouraged the public to report any relevant tip, including information that may seem minor to the FBI or local police. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
Bulgarian authorities are investigating the deaths of 6 people found in 2 separate locations in the mountains of western Bulgaria over the past week, in a case marked by conflicting evidence, unusual behavior, and unanswered questions that led a senior prosecutor to compare the events to the 90s mystery television series Twin Peaks. The report.
The deaths occurred in 2 clusters of 3, roughly a week apart, in a remote mountainous area near the Serbian border. All 6 victims were linked to the same small group, deepening the mystery surrounding the circumstances of their deaths. The first incident was reported on February 2nd, when firefighters were called to a blaze at an isolated mountain hut near the Pethoran Pass in the western Balkan Mountains. After extinguishing the fire, emergency responders discovered the bodies of 3 adult men inside the structure. Preliminary forensic examination showed that the men had died from gunshot wounds. Firearms and ammunition were found at the scene. Investigators said the fire appeared to have been started intentionally, though it remains unclear whether it was set before or after the deaths. Authorities later confirmed that the 3 men were members of an organization registered as a non-governmental group involved in forest patrols and environmental monitoring. Inside the hut, police also found banners and religious materials, including Buddhist texts, which investigators said may or may not be relevant to the case. Security camera footage from nearby areas reportedly showed all 6 individuals together shortly before the first deaths. According to investigators, the group later split up, with 3 people remaining at the hut. On February 8, police located a camper van parked in a remote area near Okochista Peak, about 80 kilometers from the first scene. Inside the vehicle, officers found the bodies of 2 adults and a 15-year-old boy. Forensic experts said all 3 died from gunshot wounds, and evidence suggests that shots were fired from inside the vehicle. No signs of a struggle or outside attack were immediately identified. The camper van was linked to the same group as the first 3 victims. Police said the occupants of the van had been the subject of a search following the discovery of the burned hut. Bulgarian authorities have opened 2 pre-trial investigations, ordering multiple forensic examinations, including ballistic tests, autopsies, and digital data analysis. Witnesses, family members, and associates of the victims have been questioned. Officials have not confirmed whether the case involved murder-suicide, group suicide, or another scenario. Investigators said they are considering all possibilities and have not ruled out any motive. Speaking publicly, a senior prosecutor described the case as extremely unusual and compared it to the Twin Peaks due to the remote setting, the strange sequence of events, and the lack of clear explanation. The deaths have shocked the Bulgarian public and generated widespread speculation, particularly because of the involvement of a minor and the isolated nature of both scenes. Authorities have urged the public to avoid spreading rumors while the investigation continues. Police say further details will be released once forensic analyses are completed and investigators establish a clearer timeline of events. Zainab Mohammed reporting for Beetv News.
Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted associate of Jeffrey Epstein, refused to answer lawmakers' questions at a disposition before the U.S. House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on Monday, according to lawmakers and news reports. Maxwell invoked her Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination, declining to respond to substantive queries from members of Congress. The report.
Maxwell, who is currently serving a 20-year federal prison sentence for her role in helping Epstein sexually abuse underage girls, appeared via video link from a low-security federal prison camp in Texas, where she is incarcerated. Committee Chairman Rep. James Comer said Maxwell's refusal to answer questions was very disappointing, noting that lawmakers had hoped to obtain information about Epstein's network and potential co-conspirators. Democrats also criticized her silence and called on President Donald Trump to rule out any clemency from Maxwell. Maxwell's legal team cited her pending legal challenges to her conviction and advised her to invoke the Fifth Amendment to avoid self-incrimination, according to lawmakers who spoke after the session. In a closed-door deposition, Maxwell's lawyer indicated she would be willing to testify more fully if granted clemency by President Donald Trump, including asserting that neither Trump nor former President Bill Clinton were involved in wrongdoing related to Epstein, a statement that drew bipartisan criticism. The White House, however, stated that no discussions of a pardon or clemency for Maxwell are underway. The deposition is part of a broader congregational investigation into how Epstein was able to sexually abuse minors for years and how the government handled related evidence. Lawmakers have also been reviewing millions of unredacted Department of Justice files on Epstein's activities as part of the probe. Maxwell was convicted in 2021 on multiple charges, including conspiracy and sex trafficking, for her role in procuring and grooming teenage girls for Epstein's abuse before his death in 2019. Her case has remained a source of public and political scrutiny as investigators and lawmakers continue to examine Epstein's connections and possible enablers. Zainab Mohammed reporting for Beetv News.
For decades, Gubara Habashir and his family lived a life defined by movement. As Arab nomads, they traversed vast stretches of Sudan's desert with their camels and livestock, following seasonal routes between markets, water points, and green pastures. Mobility was not just a livelihood strategy, but a way of life passed down through generations. That rhythm was shattered in 2023 when war erupted in Sudan. The report.
Since the outbreak of fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces, al-Bashir and many other nomadic families have found themselves effectively trapped in the desert. Insecurity, the spread of armed groups, and deepening ethnic division have made traditional migration routes too dangerous to use. Insecurity closes ancient routes. Nomadic communities across Darfur, Kordofan, and other parts of Sudan rely on seasonal movement to survive. But the war has turned once familiar paths into zones of uncertainty. Armed bandits patrol key corridors, livestock thefts has surged, and clashes between rival groups have become more frequent. Many nomads say they now avoid markets altogether, fearing attacks or accusation of siding with one armed group or another. Checkpoints manned by irregular forces have further restricted movement, with some nomads reporting harassment, extortion, or denial of passage. Ethnic tension deepening vulnerability. The conflict has also intensified ethnic divisions, placing Arab nomadic groups in an especially precarious position. In some areas, they are viewed with suspicion or collectively blamed for the action of armed faction, regardless of individual involvement. Community leaders say this has increased the risk of retaliatory actions and limited opportunities for peaceful coexistence with settled farming communities. Long-standing local agreements that once regulated access to land and water have broken down under the stain of war. With movements restricted, livestock are suffering. Overgrazing near temporary encampments, lack of access to veterinary care, and dwindling water sources have led to rising animal death. For families to depend almost entirely on their herds. The losses are devastating. Humanitarian access to nomadic population remains limited. Aid agencies say insecurity and the remoteness of the desert areas make it difficult to reach displaced nomads, many of whom fall outside formal displacement camps. As the war drags on, nomads like Gubara al-Basha faces an uncertain future. The freedom of movement that sustained their community for generations has been replaced by fear and isolation. For Sudan's nomads, the conflict is not only a battle between armed forces, it is a slow erosion of a way of life rooted in desert open spaces, now narrowed by war, banditry, and deepening ethnic divides. Favour Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
Ukrainian skeleton competitor Vladislav Hiraskevich said on Monday that the International Olympic Committee has banned him from wearing a helmet at the Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics that features image of Ukrainian athletes killed during the ongoing war with Russia. The report.
Haraskevich, who is also one of Ukraine's flag bearers at the Games, told reporters that an IOC representative, Toshio Tsurunaga, informed him at the athletes' village that he could not wear the helmet in competition because it violated Rule 50.2 of the Olympic Charter. The rule prohibits any kind of demonstration of political, religious, or racial propaganda at Olympic sites, venues, or other areas. The 27-year-old racer has trained in the helmet, which displayed portraits of several fellow Ukrainians who died as a result of the war. Some of those depicted were athletes and friends, including figure skater Dmytro Shapa, boxer Pavlo Ishenko, and hockey player Oleksiy Logino. Individuals Haraskevich described as members of the Olympic family. Haraskevich said he was awaiting a formal ruling on whether he would be allowed to compete with the helmet later in the week. He expressed disappointment and questioned how the tribute could be harmful, noting that the gesture was intended to honor the fallen rather than make a political statement. The issue has drawn attention beyond the skeleton track. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky praised Haraskevich effort on social media, saying the tribute reminded the world of the price of our struggle and arguing that truth about the war should not be dismissed as inappropriate political action. The IOC has not publicly released a detailed statement on the helmet's decision, but its enforcement of Rule 50 underscores the committee's ongoing efforts to keep political expression separate from Olympic competition. Haraskevich is no stranger to controversy over expression at the Olympic. At the 2022 Belgian Winter Games, he held a no war in Ukraine sign after a race. The IOC did not penalize him at that time, calling it a general call for peace rather than a political demonstration. Favour Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
U.S. stock market moved higher on Monday, February 9, 2026, as the S&P 500 and Nasdaq gained after a shaky start to trading. Technology shares, which had been under pressure last week in an AI-related sell-off, found renewed footing, helping major indices finish with solid gains, while investors remain focused on upcoming economic releases that could influence Federal Reserve policy. The report.
The S&P 500 rose about 0.5% and the Nasdaq Composite climbed around 0.9% by late trading, reversing early weakness. The tech-heavy rebound was led by strong performances in both hardware and software names, including Oracle, which surged after an analyst upgrade, and broad gains across semiconductor and software sectors as traders responded to positive industry catalysts. Despite the rebound, tech indexes still sit below their recent peaks, reflecting the depth of last week's losses. The broader S&P 500 technology sector extended recent gains, while the software services index clawed back ground after a steep drawdown earlier in the month. The Dow Jones Industry Average was nearly flat, marking a slight uptick after hitting record levels in recent sessions, as gain in other sectors helped offset mixed performance among blue chip issues. Investors are positioning ahead of key economic data due later this week, including the delayed January U.S. job reports and inflation figures. These reports are expected to provide fresh insights into the state of labor markets and inflation pressures and could shape expectations around the timing and pace of future interest rate moves by the Federal Reserve. Market breadth was positive but moderate, with materials and precious metal stocks also advancing, while defensive sectors such as consumer staples and healthcare lagged. Trading activities was lighter than average as many participants awaited the upcoming data release. Evelyn Isibile reporting for BTV News.
Air Canada has suspended its flights to Cuba effective immediately after the Cuba government warned that the country is set to run out of aviation fuel in a crisis linked to tightening United States restrictions on the island's oil supply. The report.
The Montreal-based airline, Canada's largest carrier, said in a statement that aviation fuel is not expected to be commercially available at Cuban airports from Tuesday, following official notice that the fuel supply has become unreliable. In response, Air Canada will operate empty southbound flights over the coming days to repatriate about 3,000 Canadian travelers currently in Cuba. Air Canada normally operates roughly 16 flights per week from Toronto and Montreal to destinations including Varadero, Cayo Coco, Holguin, and Santa Clara. Seasonal services to some cities had already been cancelled and remaining flights will stay suspended, with a tentative restart date being revealed. Fuel shortage and border crisis. Cuba's aviation authorities notified international airlines that Jet A1 aviation fuel will not be available at major airports, including Havana's Jules Marti International Airport from February 10 through at least March 11 under a notice to airmen, not man. Airline that continues flying to the island may need to make technical refueling stops in third countries on return journeys. The fuel crisis is part of a wider energy shortfall on the Caribbean island. Cuba has historically relied on shipments of oil and refined fuel from Venezuela, but U.S. sanction and diplomatic pressure have effectively cut off these supplies in recent weeks. Mexico, previously a secondary supplier, has also reduced shipments amid U.S. pressure. Cuba's tourism sector, heavily dependent on international visitors, particularly from Canada, now faces further strain at a time when broader economic and energy challenges are already deepening. While Air Canada has halted flights, some other carriers are adjusting operations rather than cancelling outright. For example, Spain's Air Europa is planning to refuel outside Cuba en route to allow continued service, and some other international airlines are revising schedules or planning additional technical stops. U.S. airlines such as American Airlines, Delta, and Southwest said their flights to Cuba remains unaffected so far, as their aircraft typically carry enough fuel for round-trip service without relying on Cuban refueling. Evelyn Isibile reporting for BTV News.
And now to the business news. A new study by the African Finance Corporation reveals that Africa holds $29.5 trillion in mineral wealth, making up about 20% of global mineral resources, but captures only a small portion of its economic value. The report, launched at Mining in Dababa in Cape Town, highlights that $8.6 trillion of Africa's mineral wealth remains underdeveloped due to fragmented geological data, limited transparency, and elevated investment risk. The report.
The AFC argues that the continent's true mineral potential is underestimated because mine sites violations do not account for the value created through processing raw materials into products like steel and batteries. The report suggests that improving geological data and aligning mineral production with infrastructure and regional demand could unlock significant economic opportunities and reduce investment risk. The compendium also calls for stronger regional planning to align mineral production with Africa's long-term demand, noting that supply chain for products like steel are still linked to global markets rather than Africans' own development needs. AFC President Samalia Zubaru emphasized the importance of improving transparency and infrastructure to drive smarter investment and regional industrial growth. John Okezie, a former pilot of the defunct Nigeria Airways, has appealed to the Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, to urgently release severance and pension benefits owed to ex-workers of the airline. Over 20 years after the airline's liquidation, many former employees and pensioners continue to suffer hardship due to the non-payment of their entitlements. In 2025, President Bola Tinubu approved the payment of 36 billion naira in outstanding benefits, giving hope to the aging former staff. However, nearly 8 months later, the funds have not been disbursed due to bureaucratic delay. Okezie, now partially disabled by a stroke, highlighted their situation faced by former employees, many of whom are unable to afford basic needs or medical care. The prolonged delay has led to significant suffering, with some ex-workers bedridden, others dying without receiving their benefits, and many facing severe financial hardship in their old age. Okezie has urged the government to act swiftly to ensure the payments are made. The Association of Power Generation Companies, APGC, has urged the federal government to extend its proposed 3.6 trillion naira power subsidy plan beyond 2028, warning that the electricity sector liquidity crisis cannot resolve within just 3 years. The plan, which aims to allocate 3.6 trillion naira from the Federation accounts for power subsidy between 2026 and 2028, is intended to alleviate the sector financial strain. The proposal, detailed in medium-term expenditure framework for 2026 to 2028, aims to distribute the subsidy burden across federal, state, and local governments. It reflects a swift toward greater fiscal transparency and a more equitable sharing of electricity subsidy costs, with 1.2 trillion naira earmarked and subsidy payments each year from 2026 to 2028. While APGC CEO Joy Ogaji welcomed the government initiative as a proactive step, she cautioned that the plan would only be effective if properly implemented, fully appropriated, and supported by strong political will. Without this measure, she warned the subsidy plan may fall short of addressing the sector's deep-rooted financial challenges. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
And now to the entertainment news. Big Brother Naija power couple Teddy A and Bam Bam have sparked speculation about trouble in their marriage following recent developments on social media. Rumors of a possible rift intensify after Teddy A carried out a solo Christmas photo shoot, raising eyebrows among fans who noticed the absence of his wife. The report.
Further fueling the speculation, online observers revealed that the couple have unfollowed each other on Instagram, with Teddy A also deleting photos of Bam Bam from his page. The rumors come amid past controversies surrounding their marriage. In a recent interview with media personality Chude Jidomo, Teddy A revisited allegations of domestic abuse that once trailed their union, describing them as false, shocking, and emotionally damaging. He disclosed that the claims negatively affected his mental health and reputation, plunging him into a period of depression. In another development, Halima Abubakar cries out needing help for her surgery. Nollywood actress Halima Abubakar has made an emotional appeal for financial assistance, saying she urgently needs money to undergo brain and spleen surgery. This comes days after she took to social media to lament that she was being chased out of her home in Abuja. It would be recalled that since 2022, the actress has been battling with various health issues following her beef with renowned clergy Apostle Johnson Suleiman. In a distressing message shared publicly, the actress said she was no longer ashamed to ask for help, stressing that her situation had become critical. She noted that she needs financial help to undergo her surgery. To lend credence to her situation, she attached photos from the National Hospital showing her diagnosis and her condition. Chaperone leaves talent agency led by Cassie Wasserman after Epstein fallout. Chaperone announced she is no longer represented by the Wasserman Talent Agency led by Cassie Wasserman after his past communication with Maxwell was revealed. Rowan emphasized her decision was based on protecting her team and upholding moral values, stating no one should defend action that conflicts with their beliefs. Wasserman, who also chairs the LA 2028 Olympics, expressed regrets for his past interactions with Maxwell. denying any relationship with Epstein. Despite this, calls for his resignation have grown, with artists like Ron distancing themselves from him. Other artists, including the bands Wednesday and Beach Bunny, have also severed ties with Wasserman, citing disappointment over his association with Maxwell and a desire for accountability in the industry. Zainab Mohammed reporting for BTV News.
And now to sports. Chelsea hosts Leeds United at Stamford Bridge this evening in a Premier League clash that promises added intensity. The Blues are coming off a 3-1 victory at Wolverhampton Wanderers, which left them fifth in the table, and a win tonight could propel them into the top four with a third of the season remaining. And that's the end of our global news. Thank you for joining and stay tuned at 3 for our news updates. I am Ruth Ogbodu. Bye for now.